What's up, y'all? I'm Will here with Schedulefly, and this is the Restaurant Owners Uncorked podcast, one of the highest rated hospitality podcasts in the world, brought to you by us at Schedulefly. We provide a very simple web-based restaurant employee scheduling software backed by legendary customer service. If you're on pencil and paper or Excel, or you're on some software with tons of bells and whistles and features you don't need or use, Schedulefly is the perfect place for you. Easy to use, point, click, and go, and we'll take great care of you. Schedulefly.com, free trial, check it out. Hey, what's up, y'all? Gosh, this is about an hour and a half long episode. Some of these folks, I just could talk to Robert St. John all day. He has been in this business for 4 decades, down in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. He owns multiple restaurants, has published 14 books, does tours over in countries overseas, culinary tours, developed a not-for-profit that donates millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of food down in Mississippi. And God, what an inspiring guy. Fortunately, was excited to come on this podcast because he's a listener. So just full circle, just great episode, great dude. Highly, highly, highly recommended episode. You will enjoy this. You will learn. You will be inspired. And I bet when you get done, you'll have your one idea, or your one thing, that is, your one thing, and you'll know what that means from listening to this. So I'm already percolating on my one thing right now. So thank y'all for listening. Thank you for watching. More episodes coming soon. See ya.
I'm a fan of the podcast. I listen fairly. It's one of the. I've got so many podcasts, and I've got such a list of ones I want to get to. But yours is one I always put up near the top of the list. So you always have good guests, and you're a good interviewer,
dude. Man, I really appreciate you saying that, Robert. They told me you're the PR for the folks that got us. Remind me the name of the firm that y'all use.
Proud House.
Yeah, they're awesome. They have a lot of give them some props, man. They've got a lot of really great people. Fortunately, we've had a few on, Scott Crawford and Steve Palmer and some others. And
Palmer. You probably had Sean Brock on over there.
Not yet, but I got to tell you, I looked at their list and I was like, I just want to have every single person that y'all work with on this podcast. Like, holy cow, what a great group of people. And they mentioned that you were a fan, and I got chills right now. It means a lot because, I obviously did my homework and read about you, and that just really means a lot to me that somebody like you would listen to this content that we're putting out there, and it's, enjoyable to you because you've got this ridiculously awesome track record and decades of experience in this industry, and you've just done so much for the industry. So, I just personally just thank you for saying that.
Well, thanks for doing what you do. I eat, sleep, and breathe restaurants, and so for a podcast like yours and what you do, it's right up my alley. So it's good stuff for me.
Well, normally, like, what I do is I cut out this first part and I go, okay, we're going to start now because we're already recording. But since you said that, we're going to leave that on there. But I always ask, everybody, just if you wouldn't mind, Robert, just introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Robert St. John. I'm from Hattiesburg, Mississippi. I was born and raised there. I'm a restaurateur and an author, among other things. Been in the industry since 1981. And 37 years as an owner. So, yeah.
Wow. All right. Wait a minute now. Let's do some math. Okay. So you've been in the industry for 43 years, owned for 37. So after 6 years, and you got in the industry, if I remember correctly, reading your bio at like maybe age 19. Is that right?
Yeah, I was 18 or 19, somewhere in there.
Okay. How did it all start?
Yeah, I was 19.
What happened? Where were you in college or something, or?
Yes. So, to back up a little more to get you to that point, my dad died when I was 6 years old. My mom was a public school art teacher. She raised my brother and me up on a public school art teacher salary. So if I was going to have any kind of money as a teenager, I had to work. And I went from mowing yards and to a school janitor to really at 15, I started as a radio station disc jockey. Loved it. I'm a huge fan of music, and I worked full time on the air, 40 hours a week, 7 to midnight shift. And when it came time to go to college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. Nothing was really speaking to me. I was 17 years old when I went off to college, and so I just majored in communications because I'd been working in radio, and that's what I knew. I mainly majored in having a good time, and I had too good a time. Partied a lot, and after about 2 years, Mississippi State University decided they no longer needed my services in Starkville, Mississippi anymore. And uh, at the time, other than my dad dying, really was one of the worst things that could have ever happened to me. And I was pretty embarrassed. I moved home, tail tucked between my legs. I had other friends who were excelling in college, and had to get a job. And there were two ladies opening a delicatessen in my hometown of Hattiesburg. They knew nothing about the restaurant business, which is evident because they hired me as the manager of the restaurant. And it's one of these things, Will, that I'm telling you, I feel now this many years later, 43 years later, I feel like it was the first shift of the first day that it just, but it was, to be honest, it was probably sometime in the first week
Yeah.
that it hit me that, oh, this is it. This is it. This is what I've been looking for. This is what I want to do. The problem, and so I kind of set my mind sometime in that first week or two, I'm going to open a restaurant one day. This is what I'm going to do. The problem is I had developed even at an early age a major alcohol and drug addiction, and that was in the way of a career. And if you would have been in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, on May 25th, 1983, at 2 in the morning, you would have seen me driving a car that hadn't had a payment made on it in about 6 months, 90 miles an hour with the lights off, and three cop cars behind me with their lights on.
Mm.
And I ended up getting a DUI, which was the second worst thing that could have happened to me at that point. Ended up in a rehab center, but turned out to be a great thing because I
Yeah.
got clean and been clean and sober ever since, and came back to Hattiesburg, where the University of Southern Mississippi is. They have a major called hospitality management, and I wanted to open a restaurant, and so I majored in hospitality management. I put my life on fast track, bro. I was taking like 18 and 21 hours, working 40 hours a week. I had Earlier I had been managing the deli during the day and waiting tables at night, just getting every bit of restaurant I could. So I was waiting tables to put myself through college, and just living in a one-room apartment above a garage. Actually, that I lived there till I was 30. But I couldn't get enough. Between classes, I would go to the library and read the restaurant trade magazines. And after my shift at the restaurant at night, I would go home and design layouts and dining rooms and menus and concepts. I've got notebooks filled with all of this stuff that I've been doing since I was however old. And got out and opened that first restaurant in 1987. I'm talking to you right now from Destin, Florida, and I came down here with my original business partner and his girlfriend, and we lived down here, and we're gonna wait tables for hopefully the last time we'd ever have to wait. So far, it's been the last time I've ever had to make a living by waiting tables, but had a blast. And we went back up to Hattiesburg to open this restaurant. I wanted to open a fine dining restaurant, and we brought a chef from down here in the Panhandle who was a legend down here. He was a legend for two reasons. Number one, everybody loved his food. Everybody knew his food. It was really good. Number two, he was a party animal.
Mm.
And this guy, man, he was like a binge drinker. He would, he'd start drinking on Wednesday, and they'd find him in Panama City on Saturday or something. But so we brought him up. I had no money. Um, uh, I sold a little piece of land my grandfather had left me for $25,000, and that was my stake in opening this restaurant. And we told this guy, whatever you do, you can't drink. I'm clean and sober at that time, about 4 years. And we said, whatever you do, you just can't drink. So he developed all the recipes. I hired a lot of our buddies who we had been waiting tables with. And opening night, December 27th, 1987, we went for a soft opening, which is, is just you open the doors, no advertising, no marketing. And we were slammed from the minute we opened the doors. Hattiesburg was ready for some, fine dining. About 8 o'clock, I started noticing some hitches in the service. Went to the back and learned my first business lesson, which is lock the beer cooler.
Oh,
And this guy drank
oh no.
a case of beer out of the walk-in and a bottle of Dr. Tishner's from across the street at the Shell station. So we fired the chef opening night. Night number two, you know who's back there, and it was me. And it was in a quick order, it was like the third worst thing that had happened other than my dad dying. Because the extent of my cooking ability at that point in time was that I had asked for and received an easy bake oven when I was 6 years old.
Oh,
I mean, I knew how to cook nothing.
really? And you went back in night two and took over.
Yeah. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, my mom had begged me not to open a restaurant. She said, "Don't do it. You're going to ruin the family name." And I said, "Mom, family name wasn't that great. I've been working on ruining that
You already
anyway."
were, yeah. You already did some work on that, right?
But so I started. I grew up an hour and a half north of New Orleans, and we were closed on Sundays back then. So I would drive to New Orleans and eat around. My girlfriend and I would. She's my wife now, and we'd drive around, and then I'd come back and try to replicate those dishes. And so I spent the next 4 years doing 90 hours a week in the kitchen, loving every minute. I paid myself $12,000 a year, which is half of what we paid the GM. And the secret, had I had any money, I would have paid somebody to let me, own my own restaurant, because
Yeah.
I just own my own restaurant so bad. And it was a blast, and that's just kind of how it started. And I hadn't stopped since.
Golly, man. What a God, there's so much to unpack there, Robert. Okay. So it's quite interesting to me. One of the things I find fascinating is people that don't fit into the box. And sometimes they may come from a stable family. A lot more times they may come from a broken home, or your father passed where there's a single parent. But either way, people that don't fit into this box, which is like, do your best in school, go to the best college, get the best grades, go get a job. Like those people sometimes, and I'm right there with you, by the way. I had
Yeah.
I don't drink anymore, but did
Right.
my fair share of partying in college, like way beyond. It was an extreme. Like everything I do is kind of to an extreme. And yeah, I gathered that, man. That's why I figured, it's like you got to find it's thank the good Lord you lived that night, right? You didn't get hurt. You didn't hurt anybody, like everything, and you got this opportunity to find what it is that you wanted to, the healthy thing you wanted to throw yourself into. You were throwing yourself into drugs and alcohol before that, and like the best at it, to the point where you got kicked out of Mississippi State, which is like saying a lot back in the 80s. But, but I think it's an interesting, I find that personality type and that psychology very fascinating, because sometimes you see people and you're like, that guy is going to be a total screw up, maybe, or maybe he just needs to, he's not a box guy, so he's got to find his thing, whatever that is. Maybe it's restaurants. Maybe it's that he's a, like an ultra marathoner or whatever. Like you think of somebody like, you know who David Goggins is? David Goggins was this guy that was like, he's a former Navy SEAL at this point, but he was like 300 pounds, worked in pest control, hated his life, was kind of an extreme at being a lazy screw up, and then wound up deciding one day, like, saw an ad for the SEALs and was like, I'm going to be a SEAL. And he became like this famous Navy SEAL and blah, blah, blah. It's really an interesting personality. And I'm getting to the point of like, I feel like the hospitality industry is sort of a catch-all for a lot of folks that may have that like sort of extreme personality type. And for a long time, the industry, while being a great place for that personality type, the work hard, play hard, there's a lot of, it's the history of this industry is littered, like the wake is littered with sad stories of people that got in that car and drove and died, or took their own life or whatever because of that, extremist way of living. And I think the industry is going through an interesting change. And I have to say, I tip my hat to you for having the wherewithal at a very early age. I mean, a lot of people would have gone through that and then maybe gone to rehab and then like relapsed or gone right back, especially when you're young. Like, we're a little older now, we get it. But for you to do that so early is exceptional. There are a lot of people in this industry that have been through that, that have had, sadder stories. There are outcomes, but there's also a big sea change, I think, in the industry of going, just because we're around substances and we have easy access, there are a lot of leaders like yourself and Steve Palmer and Scott Crawford and people that are going, hey, I've been there, done that. I'm going to lead by example, and I'm going to try to help show people that have that personality a better way, that you can dive into something you love, that is productive and uplifting versus diving into something that, will eventually destroy you one way or the other, right?
Steve's done some great things. I really admire that. And I'm still in recovery and still do 12-step stuff. And, it's saved my life, and I'm pretty vocal about it. Um, and the one, I started about 20, I've been sober 41 years, I guess, but really it was about 25 years. I've always been open about it. It's nothing I ever was embarrassed about or hid. But starting about 20 years ago, I was very vocal about it and just let people know that there's a life without drugs. And because I really thought, I mean, how am I going to have fun?
Yep.
What do you do? What do you do? And the truth is, the fun had been over a long time before that night. That I had my last drink. I was pretty much. I would have been. I had gotten evicted from a ratty trailer park and would have been living under a bridge if not for a loving grandmother who took me in. And
Mm.
so, I'm just grateful that I found a better way. I was so obsessed with restaurants. That was kind of my North Star and my guidepost. It's like I was going to do whatever it took to be able to open a restaurant. And that's it. I just wanted to open one restaurant. That was my goal in life. I wanted to open one restaurant so I could wear a t-shirt and shorts to work every day. That was really
I love
what I
that.
thought. And everything else just has kind of happened like it's happened. And we're here with all this ancillary things that have, been created.
Well, it's such a great industry because this is an industry that will give people a second chance, a third chance. It will help them find help. And it's where a lot of people wind up because they kind of blow their chance at working somewhere else sometimes. Like, sorry, you've been in jail and, you've had, like, where do you get? Well, I mean, the great thing about restaurants is like, if you will show up, work hard, be a great teammate, take great care of the guests. It doesn't matter where you went to school. Doesn't matter what your degree is. Doesn't matter if you went to school. Nothing matters. Like, race, background, whatever. It's just like, dude, it's like this awesome basket of people that will embrace somebody that's willing to put in the work and be a good teammate. And I mean, there's really not any other industry that does that, not like the hospitality industry.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And I was given second and third chances all my life, and I believe in them, and I'm still passing them out best I can.
Um okay, so you have a family now. You have two kids, is that right?
That's right. That's right. I have a daughter who's 27. She's an interior designer. And then I have a son who's 23, who's in culinary school up at CIA in Hyde Park. He's got one semester left. He came to me. It's restaurant business is nothing I pushed on either one of my kids. I'm totally obsessed with it. I mean, I eat, sleep, breathe it. It's my hobby. It's my profession. But it's nothing I pushed on either one of my kids because I mean, if you're not totally obsessed with it, it's miserable to a lot of people. And I didn't want my kids to be miserable, but he came to me at about 14, said, Dad, I think I want to get in the restaurant business. And I kind of, okay, that's great. We'll talk about that later. And he kept coming back. And finally, when he was about 16, he said, I want to do this. And I said, all right, if you really want to get into the restaurant business and you want to come work for us, then this is what you're going to do. And it's an 8-year plan. And it's really what I wish I would have done. I did it all backwards. I opened a restaurant not knowing squat. You're going to go to college, you'll get a 4-year degree, you're going to major in management, minor in accounting. After that, you're going to culinary school, study to become a chef. You're going to go to the CIA because it's like the Harvard of cooking schools. After that, you're going to get out and work for other people for 2 years. Then and only then you can come back to one of our restaurants, but you're going to start at the bottom. Doesn't matter what your education is, doesn't matter what your title is, doesn't matter what your experience is. The degree to which you rise through the ranks of the company is going to be 100% dependent on you. It's not going to have anything to do with me or my name or any of that. He's all in, and he's about 5.5 years into an 8-year plan. He'll graduate CIA in December, and then he's going to Chicago to work for the Boca Restaurant Group for 2 years. Do you know any of those guys? Oh, they're great.
Not off the top of my head. I'd like
Kevin
to.
Bain is one of the owner partners. We need to get him on the show. You'd
Yeah,
love this guy.
absolutely.
They are one of the top 10 restaurant groups in the country.
Okay.
They're great, sharp people. And they're going to put him in. It's a really cool program. They're going to put him in 12 positions in 12 months. They've
Oh,
got
wow.
about 6 restaurants in Chicago and several others all around the country from New York to LA. And then after that 12 months, he'll be an assistant manager in one of the other concepts, and then come back home. But yeah, so she's a decorator, and she's helped some with a few of the concepts. We've got one on the drawing board we're working on now, and she'll help us with that. So
Is Hattiesburg your hometown?
yeah. We have like 5 restaurants kind of grouped in what's called Midtown Hattiesburg. Hattiesburg's a really interesting town. We're an hour due north of the Gulf of Mexico. So we got access, we get 6 seafood deliveries a week. We got great seafood coming out of the Gulf. We're an hour and a half northeast of New Orleans. And so that Creole kind of vibe
Yeah.
comes in. And then we're still in South Mississippi. There are 2 universities there. And so you get a lot of, I grew up with a lot of professors' kids, and that brings a whole new dynamic into a small southern town. It's a town of about 70,000 people, but the trade area is really about 250,000.
Okay.
And it's big medical community. So it's medical and retail draw a lot from the surrounding areas. So yeah, I grew up about 4 blocks behind where Crest City Grill, which is kind of our flagship, that first restaurant we opened there. And currently live about 8 blocks from the restaurant. So it's my area. I spent a lot of time traveling around, but that's my home.
Yeah.
Is Morgan Morgan Freeman once said, Morgan Freeman's from Mississippi. And somebody asked him one time, hey, Morgan, you could live anywhere in the world. Why do you live in Mississippi? And he replied, I live in Mississippi because I could live anywhere in the world. And then he said, hell, I'd live here for the food alone. So if it's good
That's
enough for me, it's good enough for me.
Oh, man. I need to spend more time in your state. I've literally, I've been to, um, I stopped through Oxford on a,
Yeah.
RV trip a couple years ago. Do you know, Emily Blunt at St. Leo? Do you know this?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great restaurant. I love that restaurant.
That's a great restaurant. It sure is.
Yeah.
I went there and hung out with her. She's been on the podcast before, and she's been a customer for a long time. And I wanted to see that, and then I went to that. I think it's called like Trident Books. It's like the
No, Square
Square
Books.
Books. Square Books. That's it.
Square Books. Yeah. Richard Howarth.
Yeah, which is
So,
like the largest independent bookstore in the country or something. Or
so there are two in Mississippi.
okay,
Um, Both of these guys have been president of the Independent Bookseller Association of America. I mean, it's two legendary bookstores that people, wherever you are in the country, if you're an independent bookstore, they're going to know that. Square Books is the one in Oxford, and then there's one in Jackson called Lemuria Books.
okay.
And part of what I do are books, and so I've done 14. I'm always in both of those when it comes to book signings and things like that. So it's world class bookstores.
Oh, that place was badass. I hung out there for like 3 hours, and actually bought it. I bought a book. I bought a book about Popcorn Sutton, who was this famous moonshiner from up in Western North Carolina, legendary dude. But so yeah, I was going to ask you about your books. When did you start writing books?
So I started the newspaper back when those were a thing in the late 90s, asked me to start writing a food column, the local newspaper in Hattiesburg. I said, no, I don't have time for that. A bunch of other going on. I was in the restaurant business, blah, blah. They kept coming and kept coming. And finally, my marketing director said, you need to do this. And so I said, okay, I guess I'll do it. And so I started writing this weekly column in 1998, about 1,000 words a week. And it was pretty bad early on because I had shown a penchant for writing when I was in high school, but from that point forward, I had such tunnel vision for the restaurant business that even writing a letter to someone was a laborious thing to me. But after several months, whatever, I started getting a little better at it and started getting more comfortable. And then other newspapers started to, I ended up becoming syndicated around the South, and it's still going. It's been over what 25, 26 years, 1,000 words a week, never missed a week. So this column was going on, and I had a customer in the restaurant, a lady named Frances Carnes, and she ran the gifted studies program at the university. She came in every day, like literally every day. I'm not saying like she was every day. And she would get on kind of a tangent every once. Robert, you ought to do this. Robert, you ought to do this. She's always trying to instigate and motivate. And she got on a kick one time. Robert, you need to do a cookbook. Robert, you need to do a cookbook. And I would, Francis, I'm too busy. My daughter was just born. I've got restaurants. I'm writing this column now, blah, blah. Next time I'd see her, Robert, you need to do a cookbook. You need to do a cookbook. So finally, I kept saying no. And finally, I walked out into the restaurant one day. She was seated at table 4 with a gentleman. She called me over to the table and said, Robert, have a seat. This is so and so with this publishing company. Tell him about your cookbook. And so, I was trying to think quickly on my feet, and I was like, okay, well, if I were to do a cookbook, I would have recipes I developed here at the restaurant over the years. I would have stories about food in the South and growing up in the South, like I do in my column. And I would have watercolors by a watercolor artist named Mississippi watercolor artist named Y. Waters. And without missing a beat, because he had done a couple of books, he said, well, if you get Y. Waters, you got a book deal. The problem is I didn't know Y. Waters, but I just admired his work. And so I got in my car the next day and drove up to Clinton, Mississippi to the Y. Waters Gallery And I'm not a cold call kind of person. I wasn't the guy that could walk up to a girl in a bar and, so it's just not in my nature. But I walked in, I said, "Hey, I'm Robert St. John. Love your work. I've got an idea for a coffee table cookbook, with your artwork and my recipes. Are you interested?" And we probably talked about that for 5 minutes and then talked about the Beatles for the next 2 hours because he and I are huge fans there. We hit it off. Um, we set off to do this book, and about a month into it, the publisher sent me an example of what he was thinking of. And it was just this kind of rag paper, black and white, looked like a junior league cookbook or something. And I was like, oh man, this guy doesn't get it. This isn't what I was talking about, full color coffee table cookbook. So I called Wyatt up and I said, "Man, this ain't going to happen. This guy doesn't get it." And he said, "Well, just publish it yourself." Well, I'd never published a cookbook, but I'd never written a column and I'd never opened a restaurant. And so I was just dumb enough to not know what I didn't know. And so we hired a guy to design and produce the book, and we got to work. A few months later, the guy called and said, "How many of these books do you want to print?" And I thought, I remembered back at that first meeting in the restaurant when the guy was at the table, and he said, it was kind of pompous about it. He said, "If we can't sell 7,000 books, we aren't even in the business then." And so I thought, well, 7,000 must be some number in publishing or something. And so I thought, okay, this guy asked me, "How many you want to print?" And I said, "Let's do 10,000 books." I figured I'll have books for my grandkids in their attic. I'm never going to. So, we printed 10,000 books. It came out. We sold them out of my little office. Within 3 weeks, we had sold out.
Holy
Three
cow.
months later, yeah, 3 months later, we sold out a second printing, and it just went nuts after that. And I'm sitting here 14 books later, and it's just been, you know, it's been this again a thing I never planned on that I became passionate about. And not all of them are. I got a 3 book deal with a New York publisher and had a fun experience there, but learned pretty quickly that it's actually more profitable, it's more fun, and I have 100% creative control if I go back to self-publishing. And
Yeah.
I can keep, and I'm a big eat local guy. If
Mm.
you come to our restaurant, there's a 30-foot mural in the back of the restaurant that says "Eat Local." I'm all about eating local, shopping local, buying local. And so by self-publishing these books, I can keep them just in independent bookstores like Square Books and Lemuria and those kind of places. And we've got an audience, and so when these books comes out, we don't have to deal with the national big box retailers or any of those guys, and we can support locally owned bookstores. And it's just become a thing. There's so many things in my life that I've just I never planned on that have happened. And I think just being lucky and having good timing and being in the right place at the right time has just worked. So
Well, you're definitely an autodidact, and I love just how you roll and figure it out as you go. And that is an impressive resume. If somebody is wanting to uh, dial up some of your books, and they don't have independent bookstores nearby or they're not available there, where do they go? They go to your website?
they got robertstjohn.com,
Okay.
and some of those places, yeah, I think I'm online, like on Amazon and stuff. We don't sell to Amazon, but other people who have bought them or whatever so do it. We about 2 years ago, I formed something called the Independent. Um, well, that's the Independent Restaurant Coalition I was going to talk about, but the Institute for Southern Storytelling at Mississippi College, and we're doing documentaries on different people and telling stories. We did. There's an artist from Ocean Springs whose name was Walter Anderson.
Mm.
We did a documentary on Anderson and a companion book that's on the website. Won a couple of regional Emmy awards on it, and just this thing took off that we're doing now, this Institute for Southern Storytelling. We just finished a documentary on the Mississippi writer Eudora Welty, who was like the queen of short stories, and especially Southern short stories. There'll be a companion book that comes out uh, here in probably two weeks, I guess, with that. So it's not all cookbooks. I've written a children's book, and there's couple of collections of my columns and things like that. But
Institute for Southern Storytelling. Ah, interesting.
I'm
I like that.
proud of that. Yeah, yeah. It's a guy named Anthony Thaxton and I did a television show called Palette to Palette. The watercolor artist and I did 5 seasons of a show on PBS called Palette to Palette, where we were traveling around. I think 2 episodes were in Mississippi. We did one season actually, 2 seasons in Mississippi. We did a season in Tuscany, we did a season in Venice, Bologna, Milan, and we did a season Rome, Amalfi, Naples. And the guy who was the director, editor, filmmaker for all of those, a guy named Anthony Thaxton, and he and I did these documentaries together, and we formed this Institute for Southern Storytelling, and we've got, there's so much out there that is true to the South, that, and it's not just the John Grishams and the William Faulkners of the world, or the Walter Andersons of the world, but we got such great musicians, and all kinds of storytellers, whether it's through visual art or music or anything like that. And so we're showcasing that, and Mississippi College has just been over backwards and rolled out the red carpet for us. They're located in Clinton, Mississippi.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Uh, if I don't get myself back on track, I will start asking you about nothing but this, because I'm fascinated with that and Southern storytelling. So we may have a side conversation about this. I've got to figure out a way to come hang out with you sometime, Robert. What about the IRC? I mean, I'm very familiar with the IRC, Independent Restaurant Coalition, that was, y'all got going during COVID, which was amazing. But talk about, I mean, tell me, we can just talk a little bit about what y'all did, but then where is the IRC today, and how do we continue to support and foster and spread the message that you're so keen on, as am I, about, supporting independent restaurants, because of the in businesses in general, but particularly restaurants in this case, I believe add so much to any community, and they're a huge part of what makes any community great. So talk a little bit about the IRC.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. In March of 2020, when everything was just initially just falling apart, on the 18th, a group of 18 restaurateurs from all over the country, a lot of names you'd know: Tom Colicchio, Andrew Zimmer, and Will Guidera, a lot of folks got together and decided to, kind of band together, form what was called the Independent Restaurant Coalition, to figure out, what, if anything, we could do to save independent restaurants. The next day, the 19th, I was the 19th person. And on that call, somebody said, if you know a congressman or senator, let us know. And I'm from Mississippi. It's a pretty red state. So we have 2 Republican senators, and one, Roger Wicker, was chairman of finance at the time, which were one of the 4 big committees that were dealing with, at the time, it was PPP and things like that. And he's a good friend of mine, and we've done a lot together. And so I kind of raised my hand. Everybody else was kind of leaned towards the other side of the aisle. So I was this lone, red state guy. And it was, it's kind of one of those things. And I was able to call Senator Wicker and work with his folks. And we had somebody else get with Congressman Blumenauer from Oregon. And we put together a bill that we asked for an initial $60 billion. And as Congress is wont to do once it got through all the committees and all the stuff. It was like 120 billion, which was more than we needed to save. The 60 billion would have saved all the independent restaurants in the country. And there's a guy named Harry Root in your part of the world. Do you know Harry?
Mm-mm.
Big wine guy. He's the one that originally did all the math on that. And so within we got a new president, a new Congress, and by I think it was March of the next year, maybe February. I think it was February of the next year. 11 months later, we were able to secure $26.4 billion from Congress that went to independent restaurants. And as I think politics works, along the way, other people kind of got in the mix, and the original, but 26 billion in 11 months is pretty stout. When our lobbyists were telling us, man, I have clients that I'm trying to get 10 million out of Congress for 20 years, and we couldn't do it. So I think it's a testament to the people that were working with the IRC, the passion. When you're looking at a cataclysmic event that's just, I was having conversations with my kids, and that March is like, guys, we may have to sell the house. We don't know what's coming.
Yeah.
My very first restaurant, I had two COVID casualties. My very first restaurant, the fine dining restaurant, was a COVID casualty. We had a small little boutique donut shop that we closed during COVID. But otherwise, we came back stronger. All of my restaurants didn't get that relief money. Two or three of them did. But it was something to be a part of, that was just a pure, I mean, we were meeting twice a day, every day for the first 3 or 4 months on Zoom. And I was on the board. We formed a board of directors after a year or two. I can't remember, maybe 2 years in. I was on that initial board for a year, and then rolled off to where people that maybe had more time they could devote to it. But Independent Restaurant Coalition is still alive and well. I'm going up to DC with a contingent from the Restaurant Coalition. We're working on, different issues, and we'll continue to do so on behalf of independent restaurants. Because, I mean, the big chains,
Yeah.
big stick, and they have all the money, and they've got people, speaking on their behalf, all over the place. But the mom and pops and the little guys need a voice, and we were just trying to survive in those early days, but now we've become that voice for local independent restaurants.
What a great thing, born of such a nearly cataclysmic, horrible event that many closed, were casualties, as you said. Some people retired. Some people have just dug in and got a lot better from it and have grown out of that. But I'm glad to hear that there's still that voice, because there are other associations, if you will, and it's, heavily favor big chains and big organizations, and that's where they get a lot of their funding. And I love I love that y'all have done that, and I love the support for the independent restaurants. They are, people that own independent restaurants are just, dude, I thought I wanted to start a restaurant, and then I started doing this podcast.
Yeah.
And I was like, hell, I don't have what it takes. It's got to be somebody like you. And you said it, you got to love it. I mean, you got to really love it. And there are those of you that have it in your DNA, and you're meant to do it, and you're great at it, and it's the only thing you want to do, and it's the only thing you'll ever do. But all of you, without fail, every, really true, loyal, devoted, independent restaurant owner I've ever met and talked to on here or anywhere gives everything they have to their career, their passion, their love, their devotion to their team of people that work for them, their devotion to their community. I mean, the amount, like the resources and time and money that y'all give back to the communities you serve is just monumental. It's
Well,
absolutely
it's the hospitality business, that's what we're in the business to
what,
do. And
yeah,
some people are just wired like that. I think what the nation really doesn't realize is that, number one employer across America is government. Government hires more people working in government than anything. So you take that out because that doesn't really count.
yeah,
So so then non-government number one is healthcare.
yep,
Number two is hospitality.
yep,
So we employ the second most number of people other non-government than any other industry besides healthcare. And so the problem is most of us are so busy and swamped we
yep,
don't have time to get up and fight for the things that will help help the little guy do. And that was the beautiful thing about being a part of the Independent Restaurant Coalition, is we were fighting for the little guys.
yeah.
And I'm a little guy. There are other organizations like you say that the McDonald's of the world and those guys um, they have a big stick, but it's natural that you're going to answer to those people who butter your bread. And we weren't involved with any big organization like that. We were just restaurants in Charleston and Hattiesburg, Mississippi, all over the country.
You know, yeah, well, the, the hospitality is about taking care of others around you, and truly giving everything that you have to that effort. Um, that gets back to why sometimes the substance can be an issue, because it's just kind of like this work hard, play hard
Yeah.
environment. What what have you learned to do all these years sober? What have you learned to do outside of what you do to take care of yourself so that you're able to take care of your family and your team?
You know, um, it's prioritization. I am not naturally one who prioritizes things in a healthy manner. Spent most of my life pretty self-seeking, self-centered. And if I would have given you, there's a point in my life where I would give you the top 10 things. Number one would be Robert, number two would be Robert, number three would be Robert. Maybe I would be the top 10. And that's not healthy. And when I'm living right and practicing healthy principles in my life, then number one would be my faith. Number two would be my family. Number three would be my friends. Number four would be my coworkers and my team members. And then maybe I come in at number five.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sometime around when my kids were born, almost 30 years ago, that I really started looking and prioritizing things in a healthy manner. And really, I call it the five F's, and the five F's are in order: faith, family, friends, food, and fun. And when I spent a lot of my life looking for fun in a lot of the wrong places.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've learned, faith is whatever your faith is. If it's first and foremost, it's where you should be. Number two, family. Um, there was there was uh, there was an incident that happened. My wife was pregnant with our first child, and she was noticeably pregnant, probably 6 or 7 months in. And we'd be at a party or out around town or somewhere, and people would come up to us, usually older people, and they would look you in the eye, kind of grab you by the arm, and go, "It goes so fast."
Mm.
Sometimes that's all they would say, just "It goes so fast." And we heard this enough to where we sat down one night and said, "You know what? This thing's coming. We got to prioritize this parenthood thing." And so we at that point in time, and restaurant business is not the easiest business to be in
No.
to
Yeah.
really prioritize family, but we did. And so it's faith, family, friends. My granddad used to say, a rich man has his first dollar, a wealthy man has his first friend.
Mm,
He would
love
also
that.
say, you can judge a man's wealth not by the size of his pocketbook, by the depth and breadth of his friendships. And so, I'm a wealthy man today, not because I got a lot of money in the bank, because I don't, but because I have tons of friends. And that feeds so many different things in your life. So faith, family, friends, food. And here's the thing about food. And if most people, if I was talking to about this, they would, oh, well, you're in the restaurant business, that's why I food. But that's not it. Food is this thing, it's biblical. I mean, you think about loaves and fishes and last time, all the things, it's all through the Bible, but it's also the thing that connects us.
Mm-hmm.
I bet if you think back to the fondest memories of your life, or whoever's listening to this podcast, if you think back to your best memories, I guarantee you somehow, most of the time, food was involved in some. It's that connector. It's your birthday party. It's the time you got friends together and went out here. For me, it's my grandma lunches at my grandmother's house after church on Sunday were such a big part of my youth. But I think we have in this in today's world, we got busy, and people don't. When I was a kid, my mom came to the back door, yelled supper. We ran inside and sat down and had supper. Today, moms go to the back door, yell supper. Everybody hops in the minivan, goes to a restaurant. Well, I'm in the restaurant business. Maybe a good thing for the restaurant, but maybe not so good for, people have gotten used to driving through a window, grabbing a bag, taking it home, putting it in front of the TV and calling that supper. And
Mm.
that's just not supper. And
Dude, they
you know,
don't yell outside now, dude. Robert, they don't yell outside supper.
yeah,
They don't even get in the van. They go and they open the door and they yell because the kid's got the headphones on playing the game or on Snapchat or whatever, and then they say, "Supper's here,"
Uber Eats
which
coming
was
to
a
town. Yeah,
freaking somebody showed up with the freaking Uber.
yeah,
Oh man, sorry. I
yeah. You're
just
right.
like, dude, it's
No,
like
no, no,
we
no.
went
You're
from one
absolutely
to the
right
other
about
so freaking fast. It's insane.
it. Yeah. It's so that's this thing, and I'm chief among the sinners. It happened to me when the
Oh.
kids had football, they had cheerleading, they had this and that. And we had to kind of sit down one day and say, you know what? We need to take a look at this. We need to sit down and share a meal and have supper together. And I'm gonna tell you, it's one of the better things we ever did. And we used to play a game and we go around the table and I would ask, what was the best part of your day? And my wife would have a thing, and then my daughter, maybe she did a new project at school, and maybe my son only got in trouble twice, at school or some kind of thing. But every time it came to me, every time, no matter what had happened that day, and we're playing that game, the best part of my day was sitting there at that table
Yeah.
with those people and sharing a meal.
Yeah.
And so the fun part, so it's faith, family, friends, food, and fun. The fun part about it is if you've got three or four of those other things going on, the fun just
It
happens.
does. It does.
So I was looking for fun in all these wrong places, and it was there. I am a 62-year-old man still talking so fondly about having lunch at my grandmother's house, on Sunday. And the thing about that, it was all there. Faith is after church. Family was all there. Friends were always invited. Food, you're doggone right, it was great food. And so there it is. And so I always try to encourage people to share a meal with each other. And it doesn't have to be a mom, a dad, 2.5 kids and a dog. It can be, your next door neighbor or your great aunt or your great aunt's next door neighbor. It doesn't matter, just share a meal and create those memories, and those kind of five F's will come together. And that's kind of the meaning, at least of my life these days.
Man, you simplified it better than I was. I love this. I gave my daughter, she's a junior this year. She just went back to Penn State, and I wrote an index card, gave it to her before she went back, and it had 8 items. I said, this is the key to living a good life. And number 1 and number 8, well, number 1 is start your day in prayer and gratitude. And then number 8 is end your day in prayer and gratitude. And one of those is it, basically in this order, prioritize your faith, your family, and your friends, like in that, that's got to be your, and then there are, some other things, but I like the five F's. I like that, man. That's
You
perfect.
nailed it, man.
Yeah.
You nailed it. That's it. You got it.
Well, you get, we share a lot of, I can tell you we share a lot of attributes and had a lot of probably similar stories to tell from early days that you look back and just thank the good Lord that you made it through it, because here you are and you don't even know why you were able to make it through some of those things, or that you were spared, but for whatever, some other purpose. And so I'm super grateful for that. I want to get back to something that you said, Robert, which is really fascinating. And I think, in a lot of ways, it's really unfortunate, is that our largest employer is the government, which is why you had to spend, to get that done in 11 months and get that's unheard of, right? Because with so many government employees and such a big government, there's a lot of bureaucracy and red tape. Okay, so, but whatever, like that is. Healthcare being the number 2 provider is so disappointing to me, because we've become this culture where it's like, on the one end, we're like programmed into eating this processed, cheap, high margin crap. And then and then it's like, but that's okay because you just go to the doctor all the time and get all these medications and all this stuff that, and you're taking 50 pills, and it's like, golly, that's so disappointing.
Yeah,
But
our system isn't geared towards prevention and wellness. It's geared towards, curing once it's happened.
It's geared towards treating the symptom and not the underlying and the root cause. I mean, so much of because your 5 F's, look, food, particularly if that food is, that's what we're, I've gotten really big into this over the last decade, and it's changed my life in a lot of ways, of single ingredient foods and just putting things in my body. That's what's fueling all this stuff. So I view that as a big investment of, putting healthy things into my body, because, I want to be not I want to be able to have fun and enjoy time with my family and my friends and be active and be happy. And it's like putting crappy gas into, Ferrari. It ain't going to work real well, right? Or putting more like, I got an old Forerunner, if I put diesel in there, that shit ain't gonna work. It's not gonna run. You got to put good stuff in there. But I think that but it's wonderful that hospitality. I think it's, what is it, like 15 or 16 million people? I don't know. I know that was maybe pre-COVID. I don't know where we are now, but thankfully people are getting back into the industry, and I think that I really would love for us as a society to embrace hospitality more and more as such a foundational piece of what we're missing right now, which is, like you mentioned, blue states and red states. And, where there's this aisle, and it's divided. There's two, you're either this or you're that, and everything's so bifurcated. And I'm like, there's a lot of the media and a lot of groups and organizations that benefit from making it seem that way. But most people are kind of somewhere, if you sit around with somebody, you can find common ground with almost anybody. And the best place in the world to do that is at a restaurant with people you work with, or as diners. The best place in the world that brings together this collective group of people from all backgrounds is restaurants. And frankly, what restaurants give us that we need so much more of in our culture right now is putting others first. That's why you said you went from being number 1, 1 through 5 is Robert. Now Robert may be in there at the very, but it's Robert's using himself to give to others. And that's where you probably where you've really learned to find real joy, is I want to just help others and do for others and take care of others and give to others and be there for others and lead others and help, like that's what hospitality teaches you to do. And I'm like, I almost feel like there should be like a national mandate. Like, I used to think maybe we should probably have to serve in the military for a couple of years or whatever. Like, it wouldn't be a bad thing. Now it's like you should have to work in a restaurant for 2 years because you're going to learn like how the real world really works. And if you can take these transferable skills, but if you had to sit there and serve, you know, uh, temperate or impatient people on a night when the restaurant slammed and the freezer broke or the chef was drunk and got fired, and you're able to learn to keep your cool and work well with the team and not like blow up on customers and like and just deal with all the things that come along with that, man, you're going to be able to do just about freaking anything. Really. Like, go do that and then go work in some office. It's like, oh, this isn't stressful. Guys, like, go work in a restaurant for a little while.
Hard to argue that point.
Uh, well, um, okay. I'm curious how things are going in general in restaurants in Hattiesburg because depending on who I talk to right now, I mean, dude, I'm talking to some that you mentioned on that IRC board where they're like, dude, we are really struggling right now. Like, I've been at this for 40 years and like, holy crap, like we need some things to change this fall. Like but that seems to be a lot of that's like Denver's really tough. New York's really tough, San Francisco, LA, but man, I mean, I haven't talked to anybody in, small southern town in a while. So how's everything going down in Hattiesburg?
Well, I'll tell you what, I mean, we are right now hitting on all cylinders.
Okay.
And we're having the best years in our restaurants we have ever had. And it's, there haven't been more people that have moved to Hattiesburg, but what happened during COVID is and you alluded to this earlier in the podcast, it forced us in many ways to tighten our belts, to think differently, to think about doing business differently. I really I had always had core values, and our business had core values, and we had a mission, but I never really preached it. And today, we eat, sleep, and breathe those kind of things. And it was a challenge. We have been blessed because we're in a university town, small town with a university. We had always been able to pick and choose and hire A+ candidates, only A+ candidates. And after COVID, for several different reasons, people were still getting a lot of government money, whatever it was. I opened a Tex-Mex concept, and the day we opened, we still needed 25 people.
Wow.
And opened 3 different concepts in the day, and starting about 11 months after COVID for about a year or two, and it was challenging. But starting, I would say last fall, things started changing. I'm not sure what that was, but we're back to A+ candidates again. We probably have the best overall management team we've ever had in our leadership. We're hitting on all cylinders right now, and I would think Hattiesburg, we lost some independence during COVID, but I mean, for the most part, I've seen that level out. Hiring in general is tough. We've got an Italian concept in the Jackson, Mississippi area. We're in Ridgeland, Mississippi, which is north of Jackson, and that market has always been a tough market to hire in, and it hadn't really got any better. It was almost impossible in those months after COVID, and a year or two after COVID, but it's gotten better. But we're hitting record numbers. We're hitting record profits right now. Food cost is through the roof. It's crazy, but we've got we just got our stuff in order. We got on board with a company called Restaurant Systems Pro a couple of years ago. You may be familiar with them.
Yeah, absolutely. I do know that.
But that it got us, even though we had been in business 30 years, 35 years at the time, something like that. We were still kind of running as mom and pop in most of our operations. And we started just getting more professional and really started focusing on prime cost. And we've got there's a one of our concepts that's called Ed's Burger Joint, and it's our growth vehicle. We're about to open 5 to 7 of those in the next several years, and that thing we're putting 24% on the bottom line, and it's got about a 48% prime cost. And so, it wasn't doing that a couple of years ago. So we've just, we're, people think we're in the food business, but we're in the people business. It's
Agreed.
100% people business. And, our culture suffered a lot during COVID, and and we had to get the culture, get that ship righted. And we did, and it comes from the top. And there are a lot of times I was really a weak leader over the years, and I started getting some executive coaching and things like that. So if anybody's listening and struggling, man, even if I'd been in the business 40 years and started using an executive coach and a restaurant coach, and got him in for my executive team and my full leadership team, and it's made a huge difference in our business. So, but overall, things are good in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. We're chugging along. We're Mississippi in general. It's a state where we're first in a lot of things, want to be last in, and last in a lot of the things want to be first in. But I love how Texans are known for their pride in
Sure.
Texas. That's what I have for Mississippi, man. I love Mississippi. And about 2009, I started a nonprofit called Extra Table to help feed people. We're number one in food insecurity.
Yeah.
Number one in all of America. So it's a relatively small state, 2.9 million people. And out of that 2.9 million, 670,000 are food insecure. And 200,000,
Wait a minute. 600,000 out of 3 million?
670,000.
Okay.
So it's like 20%.
It's like 20%. Yeah. Okay.
20%. Over 200,000 are kids who eat a school lunch and a school breakfast and don't eat again until the next day. And over 125,000 are seniors who right now trying to think, can I get this prescription filled or go to the grocery store, or can I pay the light bill? It's a real thing.
Yeah.
And so I formed this thing called Extra Tables. A long story. We probably don't have time, but I will tell you this. I founded it on 2 principles in 2009. Number one, 100% of the money we raise for food is going to go to purchase food. And number two, it's going to be healthy food. Low fat proteins, low sugar fruits, healthy grains, low sodium vegetables. And last year, with a staff of 2 people, we shipped over 6 million meals to over 62 agencies across Mississippi at no cost to those agencies. So, there's something that I believe in called One Thing. I spoke at the Welcome Conference up in New York last year, 2 years ago, I can't remember whenever that was. And that's what I talked about. Just the premise of, if every man, woman, child, and every community would find one thing they could do beyond their family life and their business life, just to make whether it's picking up trash by the road, or it's, there are people in my town, somebody started a concert series of free concerts on Fridays. And, one guy's thing is Little League. The other one likes, these little libraries that look like decorated, mailboxes where you can get free books.
Yeah.
Just think in my state, if 2.9 million people, if everybody did one thing, it doesn't have to be a big thing. It doesn't have to be feeding them millions of meals. Just one thing to make their community better. I mean, how much better would it be? There's an organization. Have you ever heard of the Odd Fellows?
No.
Yeah, well, there's a reason for that. They've gone away. But in the turn of the last century, there's a building in downtown Hattiesburg. It was the Odd Fellows building, and it was an organization. It was kind of like the Masons or something, kind of mystical kind of thing. But what they were, and I always thought that's a weird name to call, a group. But what it was is they were men from different, you'd have an accountant, you'd have a plumber, you'd have an electrician, you'd have a lawyer, you'd have just a general guy. And so there were odd fellows. They came from different walks of life. And what would happen if somebody's husband died in town, and she needed some kind of plumbing thing done, the odd fellows would just go over there and just do it. And so it was the community helping people in the community, and whatever they needed. And for so long in America, that's what we had.
Yeah.
And I'm not getting political about anything, but eventually the government just started trying to take care of everybody, and there was no need for the odd fellows anymore. And the more that happened, the less communities kind of took care of each other. And that's one thing that I've kind of, at least I have a personal mission on trying to get back, whether it comes to feeding people or, doing things like that, preaching this one thing theory.
I love that so much. I'm so glad you talked about that. That's got my wheels turning in a big way. I also, I'm super grateful. I can't believe that. So for 15 years now, and you just have a team of 2, you said?
We're up to 3.5 now for a statewide agency.
Talk about a Southern story to tell right there, man. Have you guys told that story? Like, have you?
It's really a restaurant business story, because I was sitting in my restaurant business office in 2009, and I got a call from a place called the Edward Street Fellowship Center. And at the time they were feeding 800 families a month, and they had completely run out of food. I'm talking about shelves were empty. And they called panicking and said, can you help us get some food? And I said, sure, I'd be happy to help. I thought the quickest, best, easiest way to help them would be call one of my food service distributors, have them drop ship food to the agency. And so I did. And then I started thinking after that, well, maybe if there were an easier way for these places to get food, maybe they wouldn't run out of food. But I'll tell on myself a little bit, because to be honest with you, I really was skeptical there was a hunger problem at all. I was thinking, man, this is America, it was surely not. And so I went on kind of a fact-finding mission. It took about the first 2 visits. I was like, oh man, there's a huge problem. And I'm in the middle of the number one problem in America is Mississippi. And that's when I formed this thing called Extra Table, which is based on the premise if every home and business had an extra table where they could feed those in need, and founded it on those 2 principles. Because when I went on that fact-finding mission, I was going to soup kitchens and mission pantries, and what I was finding, because most of them survive on food drives, canned food drives, which they won't tell you this, but I'll tell you, it's the most ineffective way to feed those in need there is. Because unfortunately what happens is people just use it as an opportunity to clean out their shelf. And I was seeing things like blueberry pie filling and if you're a kid getting out of school and you're not going to eat again until the next day, you don't need blueberry pie filling.
Yeah.
And so what I learned is that Mississippi is number 1 in food insecurity, but we're also number 1 in obesity. And I'm like, well, somebody's eating something somewhere. There's something going on. I was skeptical about that as well. And what I learned, the more I researched, is that it always goes hand in hand. If you don't have enough money to lead a healthy, proper diet, you're living out of a convenience store.
Yep.
And you're drinking the cheapest sugar soft drinks. Yep. You're living on Twinkies and chips and all of that stuff. And then that's where your health problems come in.
Yep.
And so I planted our flag on 2 things. Number 1, 100% of the money we raise for food is going to go to purchase food. I'm not going to be a part of any kind of nonprofit where they get these fat salaries at the top and all that. We're not even going to, I formed a whole separate 501c3 to take care of the very minor administrative costs we have. So number 1, 100% of the money we raise for food goes to purchase food. Number 2, it's always going to be healthy food. And right now we work with a company called Chow Purchasing, and we're buying food by the truckload. We go out, it's basically taking business principles and applying them to a nonprofit. We go out, we raise money. We use that money to buy food below wholesale and in bulk. This company, Chow Purchasing, warehouses it for us, and they deliver it for us. So on the last Wednesday of every month, we have these trucks go out delivering to 62 agencies, it's a funny thing. We in the early days we go to an agency. They're they're on the front lines of hunger, and we'd say, hey, we're extra table. We want to give you food, and they would go, how much is it going to cost us? Not going to cost you anything. We'll raise the money. We're going to just send you food. And they will, do you want our donor list or do you want to? Nope, we just want to send you food. And they were still skeptical until that first delivery came. And then we just pull up to the back and roll the food in. And that's another thing. Most of these places are operating on volunteer labor and a lot of senior citizens, and they're going to Walmart or wherever they're buying 50-pound bags of rice and 50-pound bags of beans, and then they're separating it up. We don't do that. We buy 1-pound bags of rice, 1-pound bags of beans, all these vegetables, everything's shelf stable, and we roll it right up into their shelves and load them, because Mississippi has plenty of agencies that get food to those who need it. The problem is they're running out of food, and that's how that whole thing started. And so there's a lady named Martha Allen who we've hired as the executive director of Extra Table. During COVID, she was a one-woman show, and we shipped 5.9 million pounds of food to agencies, because what we were seeing then, it was almost like the Depression era food lines.
Yeah.
Back then. And so, we really ramped it up during that, but she does an excellent job running this nonprofit.
God, that's insane. That's so awesome.
Yeah.
On this note, I wonder, if you've explored this business format. There's a place in Raleigh, and I know there's others all over the country probably, but there's a place in Raleigh called A Place at the Table. And what they do, and they're right, literally like a few blocks from the closest like soup kitchen. But what they do is they've got this. It's a restaurant. It's a suggested price restaurant, and it's for, like, I may go in there and the burger's suggested price is $9, but I might pay $25 for that burger because the person behind me in line may not be able to pay for that burger.
Right.
And they serve, like, they just ask you to pay, if you're able, the suggested price. And it is such a cool story because it brings all people from all walks of life and all socioeconomic status into this place together, a place at the table. And you're seated next to somebody that, maybe yesterday was in line down at the soup kitchen, where you're, in there and you've just paid for 3 other people's meals or whatever. Or maybe, it's such a cool, like, a place at the table, look it up online or whatever, that, like, Maggie Kane runs that place with passion and love. And it's such a neat, way to try to help people in that community.
That's her one thing.
That's found her one thing. There it is. That's exactly right.
So if you think about,
love it,
everybody in Raleigh, if they just came, it doesn't have to be that big thing.
Yeah.
But just one thing, just one little thing. I think we get caught up, and if I'm going to make a difference, I have to make a big difference. You don't.
No.
You just find that thing that speaks to you or that you're called to do. That's why I wasn't sitting around thinking I didn't even think there was a hunger problem at all.
Yeah.
This thing just, came to me and it became my one thing. But the thing about it, what happens, and I warn you, anybody who's listening that thinks, oh, I know what my one thing I'm about to do. Once you do a one thing, it gets kind of good to you, and you start doing the one things become 2 or 3 or 4 things.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to me. And I just started these other things, but it made me get out of myself.
Yeah.
Which my natural bent is to kind of be and be that top 10. And but when I'm doing things like this, I'm outside of myself and trying to help my fellow man.
The last thing I want to ask you, Robert, is, do you by any chance know George McLaughlin?
That name sounds familiar.
He and his director of operations were just up here in Charlotte recently. They came in here and we did a podcast in person. They started a concept out of Charleston called Vicious Biscuit. But
yeah.
George was the first McAllister's Deli franchisee.
Uh-huh.
and years ago, but it, he like they've opened 8 company-owned locations kind of around the Carolinas. I think one
Mhm.
down in Ponte Vedra. The reason I brought that up is I mean I was just because he was in Hattiesburg for a while, if I remember correctly. But the other thing I thought about that reminded me of that is they had their first franchise open in Akron, Ohio, like a month ago or something. But there's one opening in Hattiesburg.
Right behind my restaurant,
Okay,
right behind
there it is. Okay,
3 of my restaurants and next door to another one. So we're in the parking, we're sharing a parking lot.
okay,
And yeah, the guys who are franchising that grew up in my church, so
okay.
I know the Russums. Yeah, they have some mugshots restaurants as well.
Um, they make some good dang biscuits, man. I'll tell you how much. Like it's a good. Now, I mean, it's a franchise. So, but
Uh,
well run, good folks. George is great. I just didn't know if you happen to know him or not. He was just in here.
Yeah,
We'll get that episode up. Gosh, we probably. I mean, we'll probably be 2 or 3 weeks before we get yours up. We've got, we're stacking them. But that's a great episode you'll enjoy if you like this podcast. That was a great one too, dude. This has been monumentally awesome, and I'm so glad we got to talk. I cannot thank you enough for being a listener, and I really, really
I'm a
hope.
big fan of this podcast. I mean, I really am. There are 2 or 3. Well, I follow several restaurant podcasts, but there are really only 2 or 3 that I listen to religiously. And what you do, Will, what I love about what you do is for somebody like me who's an owner and who's just eat up with the restaurant business, is you have people that, I mean, I learn. I'm 62 years old, been in this business 40, however many years, 43. And I'm still learning. I'm still open to learning. And you've got a very diverse group of people, but they're owners, but they're also in other forms of Eric Cacciatore was on one of your
Yeah, have you been on his podcast?
yeah, I've been on that. He's a good dude. That's probably your 2 are the top 2 podcasts I listen to. And it's because of the quality, other than today, the quality of the guests that you have on your podcast. So, man, keep up the good work, because the number 2 non-government industry in America needs podcasts and information like what you're doing and what you're getting out to people. So
Mm.
keep it up.
I appreciate that very much. If you would, I would love to. I'm terrible with this stuff, and I didn't write it down. But the group up in Chicago that your son's going to work for, I'd love to
Okay.
get. Yeah, I'd
Be
love to
okay.
get connected
Okay,
with them.
wrestling.
Yeah,
I got it.
would love to have them
Send
on
me an
here.
email or a text after this, and I'll hook you up. These guys are sharp, sharp, sharp.
Okay, awesome. Is there anything we missed? Did we not talk about anything we should have talked about?
You know, I'm not sure if we have time to talk about, but these days I spend 4 months a year working overseas in Europe and hosting tours. But that's a whole other story on how that happened. I'll give you the quick version. Um, in 2011, I took my wife, and at the time, my 10-year-old son and my 14-year-old daughter, did the absolute best thing I will ever do as a father. We flew to Sweden, bought a Volvo, and spent the next 6 months in 72 cities in 17 countries on 2 continents. While I was 10 weeks in Italy, I wrote a book called An Italian Palate. When I was on book tour for that book, people who read my column or social media or whatever would go, "Man, I wish you'd take me to Italy. I'd love to meet that chef you wrote about, or I'd love to see that place or do that thing." And I just figured it was somebody making conversation while you sign their book. But I kept hearing it, and finally I thought, well, yeah, maybe people want me to take them to Italy. So I figured I'd do it once, and I made a Facebook post, and it filled up like that. And then there was a waiting list, and the waiting list got a waiting list, and then the people that I had taken to Tuscany said, "Hey, where are we going next?" And so we did Venice, Bologna, Milan a few times. And the whole time we're filming our TV show in these places, then people kept going to Tuscany, and the other people would go, "Hey, where are we going now?" We did Rome, Amalfi, Naples. Eventually we went to Spain. We've done Holland, Belgium. I just got back from England, Scotland. And so since 2016, I have hosted. I'm a tour host. I'm not really a tour guide. We hire those on the ground over there. But since 2016, I've toured 1,200 people over in Europe,
Man.
um, in groups of 25 with 2 years out of COVID, because COVID we couldn't travel, and so that's really become something that I really love to do. And
What months
this
do you do
coming
it?
year, I'll leave here in about 5 weeks, and I've got a group in Sicily, then 4 groups in Tuscany. In the spring, I'll be in Spain, more Tuscany, Holland, and Belgium, and England, Scotland. So it's fall and spring. And actually, if somebody's listening, I wasn't here to sell that, but I actually just had a couple of openings for Tuscany in November if anybody's interested. So
How long?
love to
How
have
long is the trip?
Tuscany trips are a week long, but we do about 2 weeks worth of Tuscany in 1 week, and it's all local. It's all we stay in a little town called Barberino Valdelsa, which is like no, when we're there, we're the only tourists there, and all the restaurants are awesome. So we do the local thing, and the beauty of it, and that we stay in these 5-star villas. We travel in 5-star vans, I mean, and Mercedes vans, and the whole deal. And so we're in this Tuscan countryside with like 30 miles of grapes and olives, but within 30 minutes, we can be in the city center of Florence. 30 minutes, we can be in the city center of Siena. And so it's a total immersion into Tuscan food, wine, art, architecture, culture. You'll meet Fabio Picchi and Dario Cecchini, who Anthony Bourdain called the best butcher in the world. I mean, it's that kind of thing. So it's another one of those things I never planned on that just started, just happened.
I'm very
So,
interested. Do you go every year to Tuscany?
twice a year, yeah. Spring and fall. I'll be there for about 5 or 6 weeks this fall. Next spring, I'll be there. Yeah, but man, come hop with us in November. What we do, we don't deal with airfare and because people want to use miles. Some people want to go first class. So we don't do that. We just say meet at the Florence airport at noon on this day.
Yeah.
A lot of people go to Rome 2 days early or Venice 2 days early and then take the train down. And at noon, we all load into these vans. And from that point till the time we take you back to the train station or wherever it is, people pay for nothing. I mean, it's all the food, all the wine, all the tour, everything's covered. And my wife and I aren't group travel people at all. Never. We don't like, but for some reason, this has never felt like group travel. I'll tell you a cool thing. In May, we did England, Scotland with a group. There were 2 ladies. It was like their 7th trip with us. Most people, it was their 5th trip with us. So they just keep coming, and as long as they do it, I'm going to keep doing it because I guess it's the hospitality gene or whatever. I love turning people on to things. I always have. When I was a little kid, I'd get the new 45 record, and I'd tell my friends, "Oh, you got to hear this. You got to hear this," or you got to eat at this restaurant, and so. When I'm over there and I saw Michelangelo's David for the first time. I mean, you can only have one first time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when I'm with somebody else and I take them to the cathedral in Siena, this beautiful cathedral, I mean, then you kind of get to see it through their
Through their
eyes when
eyes.
they're doing it first time, and it's fun. And then the food. So
Okay. May or spring. I got to
yeah,
follow up. I want to talk to you about my wife and I coming. I would come this November. Um, my mom is going through chemo, living with us right now. Finishes it up in November, so we're locked in here kind of till then for that wonderful reason. But
understood.
my wife and I've always okay. I'm gonna follow up with you about this, dude. This is awesome. I can't thank you enough. I appreciate it. Please thank your family for sharing you with us, and just boy, wow, what a great, incredible, just highly educational and inspiring conversation, Robert. Thank you so much, man.
Man, it's been a blast. You keep up the good work. I'm gonna keep listening.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you.
Take care.
All right, see you.